Stars of the Void, Episode 2, The Vow of Glass. Narration ready. Single voice. Action plus intrigue. The dawn broke cold over Verelia. Pale light fractured through ancient glass, casting long shadows across wet stone corridors. Outside the palace, storm clouds raged over the spires. Inside, whispers slid along the walls like smoke, carrying names and wagers and the soft clink of ambition. Prince Kale Oranis sat alone with the weight of an empire on his finger. The family ring was cold, heavier somehow than the first time he'd worn it. Serena stood nearby, as precise as a blade laid flat. Gravity drives compromised, she said. Sabotage confirmed. Trust only encrypted channels. Kale stared toward the black, where a shadow had passed the night before. An official communique floated beside him, the Verelian seal glowing like a captive star. Solar flares, he murmured. They're blaming pirates for the loss of their listening post. Pirates don't erase signals, Serena said. They steal them. This is a lie to cover a truth she doesn't yet understand. A new summons blinked into place. The Queen. Kale rose. Then, we help her understand. He turned toward the window one last time. Far above, the Oranis escort wing held a quiet orbit, tiny silver gnats against a drowning sky. He blinked, once, and caught the faintest glimmer where nothing should have been. Not light, not shadow. The suggestion of a missing piece. Serena, he said, voice low, tell Viper Flight to run another sweep. Tight orbits only. I want their eyes open. Already done. They stepped into the corridor, and the palace greeted them with a hush that felt rehearsed. The mission. The Queen's observatory was a cathedral of glass and stone. 1,000 star charts drifted in the air like fragments of frozen water, slow and solemn. In the center of everything, the map tore itself open into a wound, a bruised purple stain spreading outward like rot in the fabric of night. The Queen stood before it, hands folded as if at prayer. Your fleet's repairs will be provided, she said, melodic and merciless. A sign of our new alliance. But an alliance must be tested. Her gesture skimmed the wound. The shadow you saw passed over listening post Epsilon. Then silence. Not interference, not jamming. Silence as a thing with teeth. We call it the Erasure. For generations, anything that strays too close simply ceases. Kale felt the air thin with the way she said it. Serena's gaze dragged across the field of stars, cataloging the way some systems dimmed when the stain turned as if to look. The Queen went on. I will give you more than passage, Prince. I will give you my ships. In return, you will be my eyes. Take your flagship to the edge of the Erasure and tell me what stares back. Kale inclined his head. A joint mission, then. The Vow of Glass must have its witness. A public binding. A ceremony? The Queen's mouth curved. How sentimental. How strategic, Kale said softly. Let the sky that witnesses our vow also witness our purpose. The Queen's gaze flicked to Serena, measuring the mind that stood 2 steps behind a prince. Then she smiled without warmth. Prepare your words. Tonight, the court remembers what courage looks like. A tremor hummed through Kale's calm. Serena tilted her head. Viper Flight reports contact. Small signatures, low heat, drones hugging the escort wake. They're riding our shadow. Remove them quietly, Kale said. Quietly is not how they want to die, Serena replied, and slipped out like a knife. The first bite. Orbit high above the palace, the Oranis escorts glided in a patient wedge. Beneath their skins, a mesh of countermeasures thrummed to life. The first drone flickered into visibility, a parasite clinging to the wake. The second and third rode its slipstream. On my mark, Viper Lead said. We peel and bleed. They peeled. The drones adjusted with feral grace, then stuttered. Their sensors went blind along an invisible seam. For a heartbeat, nothing existed but a thin white line humming between ships. Then, 3 drones folded in on themselves, like paper set alight, silently, as if sound had been robbed from the world. Viper Lead exhaled. We've got a quiet that's not ours. Report logged, Serena's voice returned. Cool. Maintain orbit. On the palace floor, Kale felt the vibration pass through stone. a lullaby played on the bones of a dying star. The trap in brocade. By nightfall, the gardens glowed under twin moons. The ribbon of synthesis lay coiled on a pedestal, a ceremonial serpent promising fate and submission in equal measure. Gold-masked courtiers drifted like motes of dust in temple light, whispering judgments behind painted smiles. Justin Verrill moved among them as if the garden itself had been designed around his stride. His armor gleamed where protocol allowed, a sword sheathed in silk. When he smiled, Kale recognized the ambition behind it, hunger grown in a house that had bled too often and received too little in return. The queen raised her hands, and the heir obeyed. "Marriage tempers empire," she said. "Today's union is tomorrow's battlefield." Kale stepped forward. "Before the ribbon binds, the vow demands clarity. Our mission demands shared eyes. I request the unredacted logs from Epsilon Post. Read now, witnessed by all." Silence fell with a velvet weight. Justin leaned toward the queen, voice like honey dripped over steel. "He twists our traditions against us, Majesty. Oranis loyalty is a fable told by men who never bled for your throne. My family did." The queen's gaze climbed back to Kale and held there. Then she nodded once. "The vow holds. The logs will be opened." Kale's chin dipped by a fraction. Serena received the signal and slid from the dais, vanishing into the palace as if she had always belonged to its shadows. Justin smiled at Kale as one might at a guest who is overreached, and the smile did not touch his eyes. Somewhere high in the palace, magnets sighed as locked doors considered their loyalties. The archive. The hidden archives ran like a labyrinth under the queen's obsidian heart. Serena moved through them with a hunter's patience, counting cameras, tasting the rhythm of patrolling boots, memorizing the distance between breaths. The door to the record vault waited at the end of a corridor that had never been intended for uninvited feet. The lock was more pride than puzzle. It wanted to be admired. Serena obliged, letting her fingers hover over its glyphs until it preened, then bled its secrets into her slender device. The door sighed. Inside, light pooled around a single console. Serena sat and called up Epsilon's final breath. No static, no scream. Just the delicate, constant noise of a living universe. Cosmic background whisper, sensor hiss, the small, homey crackle of nearby stars. And then nothing. Not silence. The subtraction of sound. The world biting a neat circle out of itself and folding the edges back together, as if nothing had ever been there. Serena felt the hair lift along her arms. A second window bloomed across the screen, cross-referenced automatically by the palace system the moment she requested Epsilon's last hour. Wedding shuttle schematics, wiring overlay. A thread of unfamiliar code braided through safety systems like a fuse tucked into a throat. Her breath left and came back colder. "This garden deserves a better story," she murmured, and pressed the data to a seed that disappeared into the seam of her glove. Behind her, a guard's boot scuffed stone. She did not turn. She froze the room's lights with a thought, watched them dim, and when the guard opened the door to darkness, she was already at his shoulder, a whisper of movement and a sleeper hold that ended in mercy rather than a blade. He sagged like a broken promise. She set him down with respect and left by a different door than the one she had come in. The ceremony unravels. Back in the moonlit garden, the ribbon of synthesis gleamed. Courtiers leaned forward as a single creature hungry for scandal. Kale's reflection wavered in polished stone. Somewhere above the palace, Viper Flight noted a second quiet seam sliding along their orbit. Serena's pulse hit his ear. "Shuttle's a trap. Archive confirms. I have Epsilon's last breath." Kale kept his face a mask and lifted the end of the ribbon. Across from him, the queen lifted hers. Between them, the world held its breath. The first alarm lanced the air. And then the ground swayed. Gravity chopped in half. Silks lifted from bodies. A chandelier of living crystal groaned and gave up its faith in ceilings, dropping to the garden in a mess of shrieks and starlight. The Queen's Guard moved as one body of steel. Justin's loyalists moved as another. "Oranis treachery!" Justin's voice cut like a bell. "They sabotage us during a sacred rite." Blades flashed, the air filled with the scent of charged metal and crushed flowers. Kale caught the falling weight of a courtier by the wrist and turned him toward safety, then straightened as if the chaos had been arranged for him. "This is not our work, Majesty," he said, calm, cutting through fright. "Someone would rather burn your palace than let Epsilon speak. Someone who cannot afford for our alliance to stand." The Queen's eyes went to Justin without moving her head. He saw it. He smiled, but it was a rictus now. Palace gates slammed, corridors sealed. Somewhere overhead, a turret rotated toward the sky. Kale felt the angle of the gun and knew it was not pointed at him. "Serena," he said, already moving. "Bay 6? "Understood." He met the Queen's gaze and dipped half a bow that was either respect or promise. "Your ships will be returned to you intact," he said. "Or not at all." "And your vow?" she asked. "Will hold," he said, and turned his back on a queen because there are moments when only that will do. Bay 6. The corridor to Bay 6 tasted of metal and fear. Guards sprinted past with orders that contradicted themselves. Distant alarms stacked into a single note, a cathedral with one bell. Serena arrived ahead of him and stood in the shadow of their wedding shuttle. It was beautiful in the way a venomous bloom is beautiful. Kale took in the graceful arch of the hull, the way its seams seemed to breathe. "Show me," he said. She showed him the fuse threaded through the machine's heart. "Elegant," Kale said, "and personal." "Palace Black Ops, but someone else wrote the song," Serena replied. "This code hums like the Erasure's echo." "Which means?" "Which means when we leave this room, we do it on a ship that can survive a gravity cut." They turned as a squad of Verelian troopers entered, weapons lowered but fingers tense. Their captain's voice was rich with ritual. "By decree, this bay is closed. Return your shuttle to custody and remain for inquiry." Kale's smile was polite, the kind that ends wars or starts them. "By decree of the vow, your lead escort vessel is already ours. The shuttle is yours, if you wish it." The guards looked at the shuttle like men who had been asked to hold a sleeping blade. The captain swallowed. "The escort, then," he said, and hated himself reasonably. "Wise," Serena said, and they walked together to the ship that had been sent to guard them and would instead become their teeth. Breakout. The Verelian escort ship rose from its berth like a beast rousing. Systems came alive in shivers. Kale took the helm because sometimes a prince must. Serena slid into tactical and wrapped the ship in quiet. The bay doors opened to a sky that had decided it preferred to be water, dark and heavy and full of drowned stars. The first palace guns tracked them with uncertainty. The second did not. A beam snapped the night. Kale rolled the ship under it as if he had been born to live under falling ceilings. The courtyard below flashed silver as the blast struck empty stone. "Contact from Palace Control," Serena said. "Stand down or be fired upon." "We are already being fired upon," Kale said, and tapped a sequence only pilots from Dead Wars remember. The ship flexed. The belly vents exhaled a cage of countergrav around them. Their own gravity went sane. The palaces went hunting. The next shot bent, found no purchase, and took its temper out on a tower, which fell with the grace of a felled god. 2 Verelian fighters rose to meet them. Justin's loyalists, quick and sure. Kale turned the escort vessel toward the void, like a man turning a cup to drink. The fighters took positions at his 6 and his 9. Serena's hands slid over the console. "I can blind them." "No," Kale said. "Not blind. Blink!" She did. The fighter's world went white for a heartbeat. When they saw again, the escort ship had stepped 3 degrees left. The fighters corrected. One found itself looking at its brother's exhaust. They danced around each other, clean, no collision. Their pilots good enough to live. "Remind them we are allies," Kale said. Serena pulsed a narrowband ping, a pilot's prayer for sense. One loyalist peeled off, shame hidden under obedience. The other stayed because doom sometimes wears a face you've loved. Kale sighed. "I will not kill him," he said, and flicked a control. A smart net unspooled behind them like a line cast by a patient fisherman. The stubborn fighter bit and found itself held. Alive. Intact. Furious. They broke atmosphere. Above the planet, the Oranis' wing formed around them like fingers closing to make a fist. A small fist, a desperate fist. The Queen's ships, those pledged to the vow, waited in a wary crescent. The space between the 2 fleets felt like something waiting to learn whether it will be a battlefield or a bridge. The Queen's voice arrived. distant as moonlight. You have taken what I gave. And more than you meant to, Kale said, but less than I could. A small silence, then. Bring me the truth from the edge, she said, and consider the cost paid if you return. Justin's voice came on next, oily with formalities to hide the bruises. You will return our assets immediately, Prince, or you'll do something foolish, Serena said, and cut the line. Staring into hunger. The fleet turned toward the Erasure. It did not look like a thing. That was the worst part. It looked like less than a thing. Stars dimmed as it turned, as if the stain had a face, and that face was always toward you no matter where you stood. On the escort's bridge, the lights settled into a dim, holy blue. Serena brought Epsilon's final moment to the main screen and left it playing on a loop. The sound of a universe alive. The subtraction. The way silence wore the shape of the room's last breath. Censor boys, Kale said. Tethered and staggered, Serena replied. If we disappear, our last thread runs to you. We won't disappear, Kale said. You always say that, she said, and smiled without humor. She launched the first string of buoys. They sailed into the bruise like children skipping into a lake and vanished without a ripple. The tether lines led back to the ship, perfectly intact, humming with nothing. Serena frowned and tightened her jaw. It eats not by cutting, she said softly, but by convincing. Convincing what? Convincing the universe not to remember what was there. Kale felt something cold walk along his spine and not stop at the end. Behind them, the Oranis wing held steady. The Verelian crescent edged closer despite itself. No one spoke to anyone else. The whole sky whispered, and the whisper was not sound. Shadows with teeth. The first grav shear hit like an insult. The escort ship dropped a finger's width and then returned to where it had been, embarrassed to have moved. The second shear rolled like a sea that had forgotten it was not water. Lights dimmed and flared. Serena's console reported everything was fine in the manner of men who had already decided not to see. Kale remembered a mountain pass on a world that no longer existed. He remembered the way wind could lie to you with confidence. He remembered his father's hand on the back of his neck, steadying the boy who wanted to run. Hold us just outside, he said. Skim the skin and make it think we belong. We do not, Serena said, but she made the ship move like a lover, close enough to know the shape of the bruise, not close enough to be kissed. A signal stuttered across the channel. One of the Verelian ships, young, proud, unwilling to wait, pushed forward. Justin's voice insisted on bravery. The captain obeyed and fell into night. No, Kale said too late. The ship did not burn. It did not break. It simply became an absence with edges. For a breath, the absence had the exact shape of a ship. Then, it did not. On the Queen's Channel, someone made a sound and strangled it before it became a scream. Justin said nothing at all. Serena looked down at her hands because they were still there. We have to assume it has a will, she said. Not a mind. A will. Then we give it something else to want, Kale said. He glanced at the tether buoys. He thought of Viper flight reporting seams of quiet like silk torn without a sound. He thought of the way predators learn to come when they are called. Serena, he said, sculpted a path. A mouth, something easier to swallow than a ship. She understood and did something that would be poetic if it were not obscene. She plotted a corridor through nothing. A fake river cut into an absence. She projected the memory of a route where a route did not exist. The tether boys lit that lie like festival lanterns. The Erasure turned. You could not say how. You could not say what turned. But the bruise presented itself as if to drink. The tether line hummed and began to go slack as the lie was eaten. Now, Kale said, and put the escort ship's nose to the edge of the corridor like a knife to a seam. They slipped. For a heartbeat, the world forgot them. For a second heartbeat, it remembered and wished it hadn't. Serena's console flared with error and insisted it was a sunrise. Kale flew the space between seconds, hands steady on dead light. He felt the weight of a promise on his finger, hot now, as if the gold had learned to think. Behind them, the fleet held its breath all at once. The tether line jerked. The corridor, such as it was, unwound like a ribbon dragged by a child. Do not let go, Serena said, not to anyone in particular. Never, Kale said. The escort ship came out the other side of nothing and into a kind of shadow that had the decency to be visible. The stars here were wrong. Their light came late and then all at once, like men embarrassed to have been seen arriving. Between two such stars, something floated. Not debris, not yet. A thing like a seed pod, black as a thought you won't admit at dinner. Serena magnified. Epsilon, she breathed. Or what Epsilon left behind. The pod was not Verelian. It was not Oranis. It was not any of the species that had condescended to name the sky. Kale felt a child's fear bite his throat and kept his hands calm. Grapple, he said. Serena fired the catch and the pod did not move. Not in the way you expect something not to move. It refused their assertion that it should be able to be moved. It held itself within the memory of where it had been and would not agree to be anywhere else. Come on, Serena whispered, and thought like a lock. The grapple remembered being attached to other things in other wars and leaned on those memories until the pod agreed to join a future. It came. The ship groaned around the weight of a story that had not wanted to be told. The pod clanked into the belly like the first truth into a room that has not had truth in it for a long time. Go, Kale said, before it changes its mind about us. They thumbed the corridor again, a lie repeated, knowing that the second telling is never as strong. The tether line sang. The bruise shifted. The ship slid along the seam between staying and being taken. And then, light. Behind them, the corridor folded up like a paper bridge someone had made for a child and then decided not to keep. Teeth in velvet. They returned to the waiting crescent, and the crescent exhaled. The queen's voice arrived with a grain of something like awe ground into it. You went in, she said, and it was not a question. We went in, Kale said, and looked at Justin, because sometimes you must share the credit for a miracle with a man you do not trust. Bring it to bay, the queen said, slowly, carefully. We will analyze in our lab, Justin said, recovering his tongue. Verelian instruments. We'll watch, Serena said. From behind the line, we set. The queen watched the pod on the escort ship's belly with the care people give to sleeping gods. At last she said, Do as the vow requires. Together. Justin took a breath that made his armor creak. Together, he said, and sounded like the word had thrown a blade through his throat. A hunter's smile. They docked in a sealed chamber built for delicate things. The pod hung between them, an egg the size of a palace door, skin like starless night. It vibrated at a pitch beyond hearing that made everyone feel vaguely guilty. Open it, Justin said. Ask it, Serena replied, if you intend to survive the asking. Kale circled the pod once, twice, a hunter measuring wind. He set his palm against the skin and felt nothing. Then he felt a throb like a heartbeat not his own. He withdrew his hand as one withdraws a story from a fire. We do not open this here, he said. Not yet. Not within a city, and not with a fleet overhead that still thinks loyalty is a kind of gravity. The queen's eyes narrowed. Then where? Kale turned and faced the bruise that had already started to turn back toward them. At the edge, he said, where the door was, where it will notice if we knock. Justin laughed, a sound like broken glass. You mean to take our prize back to the mouth that tried to eat you? I mean to ask the right question in the right room, Kale said. If this is a key, we use it at the lock. If it is a message, we speak it where it was meant to be heard. If it is a trap, we spring it where only we fall. The queen looked at him, and in that look there was something like the shape of faith if you squinted. Then go, she said softly, before courage cools. Justin's jaw worked. Majesty, enough, she said, and did not raise her voice. Serena's hand brushed the pod's skin as she walked past it. A thrumming ran up her arm into her teeth. She swallowed the taste of old smoke. Bring Viper Flight close, Kale said. Our net is clever, but it won't be enough twice without friends. Viper Flight already moved, Serena said, and the corner of her mouth almost smiled. They like it when you pretend to ask. The edge, again. Once more the escort ship addressed the bruise. Once more the bruise pretended not to listen. The corridor unfurled, thinner now, like silk spun from a widow's last dress. The tether line hummed. As they slipped, the pod on the belly began to sing, not sound. The ship's bones vibrated in sympathy. Kale tasted iron. Serena's displays drifted toward nonsense, and then, stubborn, dragged themselves back to truth. We are almost, Serena said. And then the word she meant to say was taken and replaced with silence, and she had to choose another word. There. They emerged in shadow again, but this time the stars stayed wrong without apology. The bruise accepted them into a parlor it had set aside for guests who insist. Kale felt, rather than saw, the shape moving through the dim, like a whale might move through the water of a universe that had never known whales. Not mind, not exactly, but a will old enough to be bored. He spoke, and the ship kindly pretended the words went somewhere. We brought back what you left, he said. We want to know why. The pod answered by warming, then cooling, then settling into a hum that matched the escort's heart. Serena closed her eyes and let the hum touch the frequency of her bones. Patterns sketched themselves on her inner eye like children's chalk. It's not a weapon, she whispered. It's a... The word went missing again. A doorbell. The shape in the dark turned the way storms turn, and the pod unlatched like a mouth. Nothing came out. Nothing in the carefully engineered shape of something. The kind of nothing that waits to be filled. Kale's calm crackled with the sound of many people watching nothing happen very intently. Record everything, he said softly. Serena did, and at the same time did something you cannot train for. She reached into the absence as if she were reaching to take a friend by the hand. Her fingers closed around the memory of a handle. She pulled. A room without a room. The bridge did not change. The ship did not move. And yet Kale and Serena stood somewhere else together. Not with their feet. With their consent. They stood in a room that remembered being made, and in that remembering offered courtesy. In the center of the room floated a model of the bruise, but living. It pulsed like a muscle, contracting and relaxing in time, with a heartbeat that belonged to no creature and every creature at once. A voice, not sound, touched them. Not a language. A willingness to be translated. We are repair, it suggested. We are cleaning a wound. Kale's throat worked. What wound? You. It was not an accusation. It was a diagnosis. You tear, you stamp, you infect. We cut away infected memory. We remove what insists on rotting. Serena felt something like grief, furious and thin. Ships. People. The room did not change. Infection is not precious, it suggested kindly. It is an obligation. Kale swallowed fire. We are not infection. Sometimes you are not, it allowed, curious. Those who brought the bell were not. The bell? Serena asked. The pod, the room suggested, as one might explain a door to a child. Kale closed his eyes for one breath and saw war across 5 systems, the way men had ways of naming their sins. He opened them. If we carry the bell, he said, do you listen? Yes, the room suggested, when rung with care. Serena exhaled a small, ragged laugh. And when rung with malice. We clean faster, the room offered, with genuine concern. Kale looked at Serena. Serena looked at Kale. Their faces were 2 halves of a coin tossed into a well. Then listen, Kale said. We ask you to spare what does not infect. We ask you to show us where our rot is so that we can cut it out ourselves. The room considered. The bruise pulsed. In orbit high above Verelia, a queen forgot to breathe. In a quiet hall, Justin's hands curled helplessly into fists. At last, the room offered a concession the size of a star. We will mark it for you. We will not touch what you agree to clean. How do we agree? Serena asked. Ring the bell, the room suggested, pleased, and closed like an eye. The bridge came back. The pod cooled. The bruise did not turn away, but it did not reach. On Serena's display, the map of space redrew itself with soft lines marking corridors of mercy. Through the corridors pulsed faint red threads, places the Erasure would have taken first. Kale looked at the threads and saw the path of a future in which he did not get to indulge in the luxury of sleeping. Transmit, he said, to both fleets. Serena sent the map. On the Queen's channel, silence reigned, the kind of silence people get when they realize their prayers have a department. Justin spoke finally, hoarse. You cannot expect us to trust. You can expect to live, Kale said. The vow, remembered. They turned the ship, not away but around, a gesture of respect. The bruise did not follow, it stayed. The corridors stayed painted across the stars, a promise temporary as any treaty. In the docking chamber, the pod sat like a stone that had dreamed of being a bell and woken as something else. Kale faced the queen in her private chamber because this part had to be done without witnesses or weapons. "The Vow of Glass," he said, voice quieter now that it had something to carry. "We took it for strategy. We will keep it for survival." The queen studied him. She looked tired and more beautiful because of it. "And what of men who start fires in my garden to trap their betters beneath smoke?" Kale did not look toward where Justin stood outside that room, pretending not to listen. "Those men," he said, "are infection." The queen's mouth made the smallest movement, which, in a woman who commanded the sky, was a kind of weeping. "Then cut," she said. Kale bowed fully this time, not because the script said to, but because it is polite to bow to a woman who has decided to be honest at last. The edge of the knife. When he returned to the bridge, Serena had already plotted the corridors into the fleet's bones. Oranis ships and Verelian ships both shifted in space, almost shyly, like dancers who have been given their marks and for the first time can admit they wanted to dance. "Viper flight ready," Serena said. "The Queen's outer wing requests our lead." "Give it," Kale said. "And us?" Serena asked. He looked into the dark. It looked back with the courtesy of a predator that has been asked its name and decided to tell you one of them. "Between light and shadow," he said, the words finding him as if they had been waiting. "We carve our fate." He laid his hand on the helm. The ship purred. "Take us in." The lights dimmed, not as failure now, but as consent. Somewhere far behind them, a bell that wasn't a bell rang once, softly, and corridors of mercy brightened in answer. The bruise opened its parlor. The episode ended, as all good stories do when there is more to tell. Not with the door closing, but with a hand on the latch. Fade.